In the desolate heart of the American West, where the earth cracked under the weight of the sun and the wind whispered secrets of lost souls, a widowed rancher named Jonah McCall had long since dug a grave for himself. The loss of his beloved wife had hollowed him out, leaving only a shell of a man, confined to the shadows of his barren homestead. Each sunrise was a cruel reminder of her absence, the sprawling plains stretching endlessly before him like a graveyard of memories where laughter once danced on the breeze and love had bloomed amidst the sagebrush. Jonah had taken to a life of solitude, steering clear of the bitter world beyond his weathered fence, where lawmen turned a blind eye to corruption and greed festered among the prosperous. Days bled into nights as he toiled at his ranch, the rhythmic creak of the gate his only companion. The ghosts of the past surrounded him, echoing in the silence, and the weight of his sorrow kept him rooted in the shadows of despair. But fate, it seemed, was not done with him yet. One sweltering afternoon, as the sun hung low in a sky bruised by the promise of a storm, a figure appeared on the horizon. The sight of her, a girl no older than 16 with dark hair billowing like a wild banner in the wind, pulled Jonah from the depths of his melancholia. Her feet barely touched the ground, each hurried step betraying a desperation that tugged at the corners of his heart. As she drew near, he could see the glint of a necklace around her neck, shimmering with an unsettling familiarity. It was a necklace he had gifted to his wife, a delicate trinket woven with the stories of their love and the hopes of their shared future. Jonah's breath caught in his throat as she approached, the innocence of her presence stirring something long buried within him. The girl stopped at his gate, her wide, fearful eyes searching his weathered face. "Please, sir," she gasped, her voice trembling like the leaves of a trembling aspen. "We need your help." The reality of her words crashed over him like the sudden thunderclaps that often heralded a summer storm. Behind her, shadows loomed, 3 men, rough and menacing, their faces hardened by the bitter edge of the world. They were not just any men. They were representatives of a corrupt power that thrived on fear and division. Jonah recognized them immediately, local enforcers, working for a land baron whose lust for land knew no bounds, peddling in hatred and violence like a snake oil salesman. "Who are you?" Jonah demanded, his voice a low rumble, the ghost of authority lingering in his words. The girl hesitated, glancing back at the men who stalked closer, their intentions as clear as the skies were blue. "I'm Naima," she finally replied, "from the Serafina tribe. We, my people, are being hunted. They say we've trespassed, but the land belongs to all of us. Please, sir, they'll kill us if you don't help." Jonah felt a jolt of recognition, the weight of her plea settling heavy upon his heart. He had heard the tales of the Serafina, their plight echoing through the saloons and trading posts like a ghostly hymn whispered amidst the bravado of drunken cowboys. The world painted them as savages, but in this moment, he saw a girl desperate for survival, a living testament to a rich culture and history that had been systematically erased by the likes of those approaching. The moral dilemma loomed large before him. He could turn her away, send her back into the maw of danger and return to the safe cocoon of his self-imposed isolation. Or he could reach beyond the boundaries of his grief, risking everything he had left to help a girl who had appeared like a flicker of light in his shadowed existence. "Why should I risk my life for you?" Jonah asked, his voice betraying the internal struggle that raged within. "Because," Naima said, stepping closer, "you know loss. You know what it means to grieve. And you know this land. This land needs people who fight for it, not just for themselves, but for everyone." Jonah's heart twisted painfully, a reminder of the love he had lost and the silence that followed. The land had taken so much from him, yet here it was, inviting him to stand for something greater. The choice gnawed at his insides, each second stretching out like a noose tightening around his conscience. He could hear the men muttering behind Naima, their eyes glinting with menace. He could almost hear the low growl of his own fears, warning him against stepping into a battle that could leave him shattered too. But buried deep within, a flicker of the man he once was stirred awake. The rancher, the protector, a life he thought he had buried along with his wife. With a deep breath, Jonah made his choice, feeling the chains of his isolation begin to loosen. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. "You can stay, but you need to trust me, and I need to know everything." Naima nodded, relief flooding her features as the tension in the air shifted. Jonah stepped aside, allowing her to enter his world, a world that now beckoned with the possibility of redemption. As the first drops of rain began to patter against the parched earth, he felt the weight of the decision settle upon his shoulders. Little did he know, this choice would set into motion a chain of events that would challenge not just the boundaries of his own grief, but the very fabric of justice in a land rife with injustice. And as shadows loomed on the horizon, the story of Jonah McCall was about to unfold, a tale of courage, truth, and the bonds that could be forged even in the most unforgiving of landscapes. For in the face of the storm, a fight was brewing, not just for survival, but for a future woven from the threads of hope and humanity. As the days turned into weeks, Jonah found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Naima and her young brother, Tayanita, were a breath of fresh air in his lonely existence, their laughter echoing through the otherwise silent ranch. He taught them how to tend to the land, sharing his knowledge like precious heirlooms, while Naima brought warmth back into the cold corners of his heart. But beneath the surface of this fragile peace, storm clouds gathered, dark and foreboding. Rumors began to swirl through the nearby town, carried on the lips of gossiping townsfolk. The presence of the two Native Americans at Jonah's ranch stirred the pot of racial tensions that had long simmered beneath the surface. The town sheriff, a man named Silas Reed, saw opportunity in the unrest. Known for his heavy-handed ways and unyielding belief in the superiority of his kind, he began fanning the flames of resentment, painting Jonah as a traitor to his race. One fateful evening, as Jonah patched the roof of the barn, the sound of approaching hooves caught his ear. He looked up to see a small band of townsmen, led by Sheriff Reed, riding up with the setting sun casting ominous shadows across their faces. Jonah's heart sank, for he knew this visit would not be a friendly one. "McCall!" Reed shouted, spitting the name like a curse. "You're harboring them, aren't you? Hiding them like they're your own kin." Jonah's voice was calm but firm. "They're just children trying to survive. They've done nothing wrong." Reed laughed, a harsh, derisive sound. "Nothing wrong? They're savages, McCall. You think you can change the world by playing the Good Samaritan? This is our land, and I won't let you dirty it with their kind." Jonah stepped forward, fists clenched at his sides. "You don't own the land, Reed. You just take from it like a thief. Those children have lost everything, and I won't turn them away." The sheriff's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint sparking within them. "You'll regret this, McCall. You're stirring up trouble that doesn't need stirring." As Reed and his men turned to leave, Jonah felt a chill run down his spine. The sheriff was not one to back down easily, and the confrontation was only the beginning. That night, as thunder rumbled in the distance and the rain fell hard against the earth, Jonah gathered Naima and Tayanita close. He needed to protect them from the storm brewing outside, both in the sky and in the hearts of men. Days passed, and the tension escalated. Jonah awoke one morning to find his barn doors wide open, the animals restless, and the remnants of a fire smoldering where it shouldn't have been. Someone was sending a message, and he knew it was only a matter of time before things turned violent. Then came the twist that changed everything. Tayanita, while exploring the edges of the ranch, stumbled upon a hidden cache of documents buried beneath an old tree. With trembling hands, she brought them to Jonah. As he sifted through the yellowed papers, a chill crept up his spine. These were records of land claims, contracts filled with the signatures of powerful men conspiring to drive Native Americans from their ancestral lands. "Jonah," Naima's voice trembled as she peered over his shoulder. "This is what they're planning, isn't it? They want to take everything." Jonah's mind raced. The true nature of Sheriff Reed's actions became clear. It wasn't just about racial animosity. It was a calculated move to exploit a vulnerable people for profit. They weren't simply fighting for survival. They were fighting against a conspiracy that threatened their very existence. With this revelation, Jonah knew they had to act. He had to protect Naima, Tayanita, and the people of their community. The plan began to form in his mind, a risky maneuver that would require courage, intelligence, and the forging of unexpected alliances. He would expose Reed's corruption, and in doing so stand not just for the two children who had found refuge in his heart, but for all those who had been wronged by the greed of men. As the storm raged outside, Jonah gathered his resolve. The fight was no longer just for survival. It was a fight for justice, for truth, and for the future of a land where all could belong. The time for action was drawing near, and he would face the darkness with the strength of those who had come before him, and with the hope that even in the most tumultuous of times, there was always a path to redemption. The wind howled like a wounded beast as Jonah stepped out of his cabin, the weight of the world heavy on his shoulders. He felt a tremor in the air, a sense that the storm was not just outside, but closing in from all sides. The gathering clouds mirrored his turmoil, and as he set his eyes on the horizon, a figure emerged, a silhouette cutting through the storm, framed by the jagged outline of the mountains. It was Sheriff Reed, flanked by his men, riding in like a pack of wolves. Jonah's heart raced, a mix of fear and resolve surging through him. He knew the lawman was here for more than just a casual visit. Reed had come to assert his dominance, to remind Jonah of the precarious position he was in. The sheriff dismounted, his boots striking the ground with authority, and the tension in the air thickened, palpable as the approaching storm. "Thought you could hide out here, did you?" Reed drawled, his voice dripping with disdain. "Got yourself a couple of little strays, I see. You know what they say about strays, don't you? They belong in the wild, not among decent folk." Jonah straightened, fighting against the urge to back down. "These children are not your prey, Reed. They're people just like you and me." Reed laughed, a harsh guttural sound that echoed through the barren landscape. "People? They're nothing but a burden. You're risking everything for a couple of dusty souls who'd sooner stab you in the back than share a meal." Jonah stood firm, his heart pounding in his chest. "You don't know them, Reed. You don't know their story. They deserve better than your cruelty." The sheriff stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can protect them? You're a fool, Jonah. I've got the law on my side, and I'll see to it that you regret this foolishness. This land belongs to us, not to them." As the sheriff spoke, a flicker of movement caught Jonah's eye. Naima and Tianita had emerged from the cabin, their wide eyes reflecting the fear and uncertainty of the moment. The sight of them steeled Jonah's resolve. He couldn't let Reed's venomous words take root. "Your law is built on corruption and hate, Reed. You're nothing but a thief in a badge," Jonah declared, the passion in his voice rising like the storm overhead. "The truth will come out. You can't silence it forever." Just then, a low rumble of thunder shook the ground beneath them, as if the earth itself was echoing Jonah's challenge. The sheriff smirked, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Truth? You think that means anything out here?" "The only truth that matters is the one I say it is." In that moment of confrontation, a sudden realization hit Jonah like a lightning bolt. Reed's power rested not solely in his position, but in the shadows he operated from. "This isn't just about you or me anymore," Jonah pressed on, voice steady. "It's about everything you've built on fear and lies. This community is waking up and will no longer be your pawns." The sheriff's composure wavered, and Jonah seized the opportunity. "There's a reason you're out here hunting us down, Reed. It's not just about control. It's about the land, the resources you're planning to steal. You're afraid of what's coming, and deep down, you know you're losing your grip." Reed's expression darkened, anger flashing in his eyes. "You're treading on dangerous ground, Jonah. I won't let you rally them against me." But Jonah's words had set a fire in the hearts of those watching. Naima and Tianita stepped forward, their small frames radiating newfound strength. "We won't be afraid anymore," Naima declared, her voice firm, echoing Jonah's resolve. The sheriff's bravado faltered, and for a moment the shifting winds carried the weight of a greater truth, the truth of a community rising to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Jonah felt an undeniable shift in the air, a potential alliance forming in the face of adversity. "Let them come," Jonah said, his voice like steel. "Let them see what you're made of, Reed. Your reign of terror ends here." With the storm gathering intensity, the stakes had never been higher. The moral choice loomed large, and the confrontation was only the beginning of a reckoning that would shake the very foundations of their world. Jonah knew they had to stand together, or they would all fall apart. The truth was no longer just a whisper in the wind. It was a rallying cry for justice, and it had begun to echo through the valley, awakening a spirit that had long been dormant. The storm rolled in like a freight train, dark clouds churning overhead as Jonah and the gathered crowd stood resolute against the approaching threat. Reed had underestimated the spirit of those he sought to oppress, but Jonah could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The wind howled, carrying with it the cries of generations past, the pain of injustice woven into the very fabric of the land. "Listen up," Jonah shouted, raising his voice above the rising gale. "This isn't just about us anymore. This is about standing against a man who thinks he can take what's ours, who thinks he can rule through fear. They want to break our spirits, but together we are unbreakable." Naima and Tayanita stood tall beside him, the glint of the necklace around Naima's neck catching the dim light. It was a tangible connection to his wife, a reminder of love and loss, now transformed into a symbol of hope. The crowd nodded, their resolve solidifying like rock underfoot. But Reed wasn't the type to back down easily. He had allies, men who thrived on intimidation, and they weren't far behind. Jonah could sense their approach, the thudding of hooves and the clinking of spurs echoing ominously through the valley. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, shadows stretched long and foreboding, marking the arrival of Reed and his gang of hired guns. "How you think you're brave, Jonah?" Reed sneered, stepping forward with a swagger that belied the fear creeping into his heart. "You're just a bunch of scared rabbits. I'll show you what happens when you defy the law." Jonah stepped forward, fists clenched, heart pounding like a war drum. "You're the one who should be scared, Reed. You're outnumbered, and the truth is on our side." The tension crackled in the air, each man's hand hovering near his gun, eyes locked in a battle of wills. But Jonah had a plan, one that didn't involve gunfire or bloodshed. He had seen too much violence in his life, and he refused to let that cycle continue. With a deep breath, Jonah turned to the crowd. "We have something they don't. We have each other. We have the power of community. Let's show them we will not cower, that we will not be silenced." The murmur of agreement rippled through the group, a wave of courage washing over them. Reed's men looked uncertain, glancing at each other, their bravado faltering in the face of unity. Jonah took a step back, motioning for Naima and Tayanita to join him. "You want to know who the real criminals are?" he called out, his voice steady. "Look around, Reed. These are not the people you've painted them to be. They are our brothers and sisters, and they deserve their land and their dignity." Reed's face twisted in anger, but Jonah pressed on, sensing the tide of fear shifting in his favor. "Expose your lies, Reed. Let them see the truth of your treachery. You've manipulated this town for too long." The crowd began to chant, their voices rising against the storm. "Justice! Justice! Justice!" The word became a rallying cry, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. As the sheriff's men shifted uneasily, Jonah felt the weight of the moment shifting. Then, in the midst of the chaos, a sharp voice called out from the back of the crowd. "They're not just criminals, they're thieves, thieves of land, thieves of life." A figure stepped forward, revealing herself to be a respected elder of the community, a woman whose wisdom was known far and wide. "Reed has made a deal with the railroad, selling us out for his own gain. They want to take our land to build their tracks, and he's the one who's been stirring the pot, pitting us against each other." Gasps rippled through the crowd, the truth striking like lightning. Jonah's heart raced as he realized the depth of Reed's conspiracy. This wasn't just about personal grudges. It was a calculated plan to erase their existence. Jonah turned, locking eyes with Naima and Tayanita, who stood wide-eyed with understanding. "We need to gather evidence, to expose him before it's too late," he said, determination fueling his voice. The crowd swelled with anger and purpose, emboldened by the revelation. They were no longer just a mob, they were a community fighting for their lives. As the storm reached its peak, the winds howled like a restless spirit. Jonah knew that the next moments would define them all. He felt the burden of responsibility, but alongside it a burgeoning hope. The confrontation loomed, but together they had the strength to face whatever came next. "Let's take back our story," Jonah called out, rallying the crowd once more. "For our families, for our future, and for the truth, we will not be silenced." As the storm raged on, the winds carried their resolve into the night, setting the stage for a reckoning that would shake the foundations of their world and bring the true villain to light. The storm began to quiet, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the resolution of this fierce battle of wills. Jonah stood firm, flanked by Naima and Tayanita, the three of them embodiments of a fragile alliance forged in the fires of adversity. Together, they gathered what evidence they could, piecing together the threads of Reed's treachery, each revelation igniting the flames of justice in their hearts. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the town, Jonah and his newfound allies marched toward the gathering of townsfolk. They bore witness to the stories of the oppressed, the tales of deceit, and the harrowing truths that had been buried beneath layers of greed and prejudice. Reed could no longer hide behind his silver tongue. The truth would be laid bare for all to see. With each word Jonah spoke, the weight of the past began to lift. The crowd listened, their faces a tapestry of skepticism and hope. "This man, Reed, has sown discord among us for his own gain," Jonah declared, his voice steady and unwavering. "He has turned neighbor against neighbor, all to profit from our pain. But we stand united, not as enemies, but as a community, ready to reclaim our narrative." The people murmured amongst themselves, the seeds of doubt taking root in their minds. Naima stepped forward, her voice strong as she recounted the horrors they had faced, the lives that had been upended by Reed's greed. "We are not mere victims. We are survivors, and together we will reveal the truth." As the villagers began to connect the dots, the tide turned. Reed's facade of power began to crack, his bluster giving way to desperation. Jonah seized the moment, producing the evidence they had collected, laying it bare before the crowd. Whispers turned to shouts as the townsfolk united, their anger coalescing into a force that could no longer be ignored. In that moment it became clear. Justice was not merely an abstract notion. It was a living, breathing entity that thrived in the hearts of the righteous. The corrupt man's power crumbled under the weight of their collective resolve, each individual standing tall, no longer shackled by fear. And so Reed was exposed, his malicious intentions laid bare for all to see. The community rallied together, not only to confront their oppressor, but to forge a new path forward, one that embraced unity and understanding rather than division. Jonah, Naima, and Tayanita stood at the forefront, their bond stronger than the prejudice that had once sought to tear them apart. As the dust settled and the echoes of their victory resonated through the valley, Jonah reflected on the journey they had taken. "Courage is not the absence of fear," he said quietly, "but the resolve to act despite it. We have learned that mercy doesn't make us weak, it makes us strong. And justice, true justice, is only possible when we choose to stand together." With the dawn of a new day casting its light on the horizon, Jonah knew that the fight for dignity and respect would continue. But now, they were no longer alone. Together, they would face whatever came next, carrying with them the scars of their past and the hope of a better future. What began as a solitary struggle had transformed into a collective stand for justice, an enduring testament to the power of courage, compassion, and the unbreakable spirit of community. And in the heart of the American West, where the shadows of the past lingered, a new chapter was written, one that would echo through the ages, reminding all who heard it of the strength found in unity and the unwavering pursuit of truth.